Hello, bonsoir, and hello there. Sorry, and welcome to the Get French Football preview show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Adam White. We are heading towards the end of the season, and the games are coming thick and fast, including a cup final this weekend. But who will be likely to lift silverware, and who might be still worrying and thinking about that game for many years to come? All of that and more after a brief look at our latest headlines. No midweek games in Ligue 1 this week, but there will be next midweek due to the cup final. But the big piece of news actually comes from the refereeing side of things, as it has been confirmed that Stéphanie Frappard will be refereeing the upcoming Amiens Strasbourg game, thereby becoming the first female referee to take charge of a Ligue match. The female referee has already been refereeing for a few months within Ligue 2, but this will be the first time a female has refereed a match in the top flight of French football. That is all for now, but for all the latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start tonight with the big game of the weekend, and that's going to be the Coupe de France final between Paris Saint-Germain and Rennes, with the Paris heading for their third cup of the season, their trifecta in the national stage at least, while Rennes, in all honesty, Adam, have probably been preparing for this one ever since they won the semi-final against Lyon. It's been a bit of a dire affair of things in Ligue 1, at least. There's not many players that could necessarily say they've nailed down a place with their form within France at the moment. But it's absolutely massive, this game, for them, not just because it's a chance at silverware, but it's really the only chance to get into Europe now as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It really is. And I don't know if there's been a bit of a Strasbourg situation where when Strasbourg qualified for the Coupe de Ligue final, they sort of switched off a little bit in the league and were a little bit less intense, played a little bit with less intensity than in their league games, with sort of a one eye on that final. And maybe similar things happened to Rennes. And that's perfectly fair enough because, down in 11th with 43 points, they're if fifth is the sort of the lowest place that gets into Europe. They're not making that. They're 11 points back with 5 games left. So this is really their season here and now. And although I think they've made progress in a number of areas this year, they did okay in Europe, got out of the group. Actually, probably did better than okay. Did probably at least met expectations, maybe even more. And gave Arsenal a really good game. Brilliant against Betis in that game especially at the Benito Villamarín and fully deserved to get into the latter stages. And for me, for a club like Rennes, that's real progress. But I think the thing that next on their list is sustaining that progress and sustaining them as a European club. And now this is really their only chance in the short term to maintain that momentum. So yeah, it's a really big game for them, and it's obviously a very difficult one to win. But there are there's an opportunity there for them here, given the way PSG have been playing. Okay, there's been injuries and so on, but there's an opportunity for him there, however, maybe slightly small, for them to get a result and continue that progress. So yeah, it's huge, and it's no surprise that the league form has suffered a little bit as a result.
Yeah, and it's a catch-22, isn't it? Like you said, the progress they've made this season by reaching the sort of round of 16 in the Europa League and pushing this far into the Coupe de France final. It's a real positive, but at the same time, the fact that they've slipped up in the league last couple of weeks, the draw against Angers, they were maybe a little bit unlucky. They were beaten pretty comfortably by Nîmes, really, in the rearranged fixture, at least anyway. They really should have done a lot better in that one. They weren't great against Nice. They were pretty lucky for it to be 3-2, to be fair, against Dijon. I thought Dijon were the better side and deserved the 3 points in the end. And the problem is now they've slipped to 11th, and it's a frustrating one because they're not in a position to recover should they lose the Coupe de France final, to recover and find a European spot to maintain some of this great progress as well. And even worse, if they do come out of this cup final with a loss and continue the poor form in the league, they could drop as low as feasibly 13th, with Nantes rising and Angers only 2 points behind them. There's not a great deal of resistance to the fact that they might finish 13th. And then you look at their season overall, a Coupe de France final, Europa League, but a 13th place position, and you think whether they have sort of gone forwards or if they've had to take an extra step back as well, because it's great progressing in the Europa League. It was a fantastic season. I'm sure a lot of Rennes fans would have enjoyed it, but not to be there next season sort of defeats the point of any sort of advancement you've made there already. So it weighs heavily on them, really, this game, a lot heavier than it should do. As usually the pressure should weigh heavily on PSG because they've won this cup plenty of times in recent memory, and they always think that should they not win the Champions League, they'd almost absolutely have to guarantee a national treble. Sorry, and that's obviously, apologies, my mistake earlier. That's not going to happen because of the Coupe de Ligue final. So Tuchel will be right up for this one to get another trophy in the bank, for not just for him, but to make sure the season doesn't seem like a complete failure. Because if they do lose this final, one cup, a disappointing Champions League exit, a frustrating on the domestic cup competition side of things, it starts to look like a slightly worse season than it has been, to the eye at least, for this season for PSG, Adam.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the interesting thing. It's kind of about perception, isn't it? A little bit, this game for PSG. It's about how their season is perceived rather than how it's actually gone. Because okay, if they were to lose, the Coupe de France final to Rennes, a team they're expected to beat, that would be, from their point of view, verging on disastrous, because they obviously had that horrendous defeat to Guingamp, which obviously is coloured by those 3 penalties that were given against them, and they lost that game 2-1 and went out for a cup they're expected to win. And I think obviously losing this game would be bad, but I think that it's quite low down on PSG's list of priorities. But should they lose, it obviously makes headlines. And I think Thomas Tuchel said earlier this week that that their priority is to win the double. That's like their sort of bread and butter, if you like, implying that that's their minimum. They have to win the league and at least one cup. And under Unai Emery, I got the impression that was the case as well. That's sort of a club stated aim. And as I just said, they didn't win the Coupe de Ligue, lost to Guingamp. So this is their kind of only opportunity left to meet minimum expectations, if you like, which is a ridiculous situation to be in, where winning a double is the least it's expected of you. So yeah, if they were to lose, there is that issue. There is that kind of perception that it hasn't been a good season. But you could argue that does the Coupe de France in itself really matter to PSG? Does it show that they're progressing as a club? No, because they've won it 5 times in a row the last few seasons. Does it show they're regressing as a club if they don't win it? Probably not, because they've got bigger fish to fry, if you like. So although it would be pretty bad if they didn't win it, but I still think that in terms of how in truth how the club are actually progressing, this isn't really a barometer of that. What does signify that would be the Champions League, which obviously was a bit of a disastrous defeat to Manchester United. But before that, they were showing progress. So I would argue that although that was a horrendous evening, perhaps the worst in their short history, that there is some sign of progress there. I think they've been better until the last sort of 4 games. They've been better in the league than they have been under QSI, at least in the time I've been covering the league, which is sort of 5 or 6 seasons now. They look a lot stronger, a lot more tactically varied, and look like they're capable of handling different situations. And the first 29 games, they won 26 of them, which is quite something. And although they've had great seasons like that before, there wasn't the security perhaps and the absoluteness of those wins that they managed. So they are progressing, but it's kind of under the surface, and it's not the kind of progression that makes headlines or that that we might talk about all that much. So it's kind of a bit of a duality, this game for PSG. If they as I said, if they were to lose it, it makes a lot of headlines and it looks really bad. But overall, Tuchel's staying. He's not going anywhere. A lot of the squad is kind of decided for next season, and they've got their basis after those Liverpool and Napoli wins and the way they've played in the league. So it's interesting to see what will happen if they were to lose it. Would it be branded as a disaster by the club, or will they sort of look back to those sort of instances I just mentioned? But I think it's more about how people see PSG than how PSG see themselves, is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I think perception is the perfect word to use, really, Adam, on that one. I think you nailed it on the head, because the interesting thing for them will be the casual viewer who maybe just follows their national league, really, and looks at the results of other ones at the end of the season and goes, oh, Paris Saint-Germain obviously won the league, but surprising, they didn't win the cup competitions. You can see in previous years that they have. Are they slipping? Are they not showing the dominance? And that, I think that's the perception that they have a stranglehold on French football is incredibly important to them. I think then with the clear monetary advantages where they have 5-10 times the budget of anyone else. Really, they have to show that they have a dominant position, and that slipping even slightly puts them under pressure, much like it did when Monaco won the title. It forced them to spend 300 million euros worth of talent to try and regain that strength and the perception to everyone else. Because you look around Europe now, you look at Barcelona. Looks like they're going to at least going to probably get a domestic double. They're almost guaranteed for the title, and then the final of the Copa del Rey. And you look at in England, the Manchester City are in the league, the FA Cup final, and are favourites for the title, even though Liverpool are breathing down the necks. Bayern Munich are in pole position, are in the DFB Pokal final. Juventus are probably the only outlier in this one, where they've won the Coppa Italia a number of times in the last couple of years, but are out even on the quarterfinals this season. So it's all about perception, isn't it? Knowing how strong your team is and looks to those across Europe that may only catch a couple of games or sort of glance at the results, at least anyway. And it's not going to be a particularly good image for them, at least if the first year under Tuchel they only manage one title, and that puts extra pressure on him next summer. I know we say his position is safe really for this year. There's no doubt he's going to return next season, but with the results he's got, with his willingness to sort of bait those above them, you may say, with his comments and with his team selection, you wouldn't be surprised if next season, if there is a bit of a downturn or another disappointment in the Champions League, that the axe might start swinging above his head again, and that's got to be a real relief for the team, at least, and the fans at least, that they will be making the same mistakes again. But it's going to be a really interesting set piece on Saturday night. I'm really looking forward to it and hoping, well, fingers crossed at least. I think the head's saying that Paris Saint-Germain will win, but the heart is hoping that Rennes can make it a nice, interesting game of it in the minimum. But what's your prediction on this one, Adam? What do you think the score will be?
I think it'll be close. I think there's a Ben Arfa element to be had here. So I'm going to say high scoring and say 3-2 to PSG.
I'm going to go the other way around. I'm going to go 3-2 Rennes, and simply because you've mentioned Ben Arfa there, I've thought all week. I think it is the Ben Arfa revenge game, isn't it? And cometh the man, cometh the hour. Does he maybe get a double in this game against a PSG side that thought he wasn't quite the man to be there and get some revenge on them? That'd be a real nice way for him to not just pick up some silverware, but also to gain a modicum of semblance against a club that he thought was going to be his final stage, but is proven otherwise. Let's go to Ligue 1 matters, because there's some absolutely massive games at the bottom of the table, and we'll come on to them, one of them in just a moment. But the important one that's happening first is on Saturday, and that's between Amiens and Strasbourg. Like we mentioned earlier, it's going to be refereed by the first female referee of Ligue 1, which is great. But for Amiens, Adam, it's an interesting one, because we've mentioned the last couple of weeks, they've been great. They play attacking football with Moussa Konate back and Godosh back in the side. They're playing. They're getting some goals again. They're producing the form that we expect of them with that style, and they're going to be all right. But slowly but surely, with Dijon's result, they've slowly clawed them back into at least striking distance, with them on 32 points and Dijon on 28, with the Dijon having the interesting game to come that we'll mention after this one. But this makes this game especially important for Amiens against a Strasbourg side that kind of have nothing to play for, which is always kind of that seesaw of either a club that will come out and play with such freedom that they're incredibly difficult to beat, or they're already on the beach. But Amiens need points here, don't they?
Yeah, they do. It's we sort of wrote them off a little bit for maybe wrote them off the wrong word, but they were out. We thought they were out of the relegation battle. That 7-point gap with 6 or 7 games to play at the time, them and Monaco ahead of the bottom 3, who all looked pretty woeful. You felt that the only way any of those 3, Guingamp, Caen or Dijon, would stay up would be by the relegation playoff, and they were kind of fighting for that. And Monaco had improved under Jardim, and Amiens had improved under, with Konate and Godos back in the team. But Godos is out for some time. I think he's got an appendicitis and he's out for a few weeks. And Konate has had a huge effect, but their results sort of ground to a halt a little bit. And Dijon have hit some decent form at least, and closed that gap to 4 points. And although at one point Amiens seemed safe, and Monaco as well to some extent seemed safe, it now feels like excuse me, it now feels like there's that sort of spectre of relegation hanging over them again. And although they have improved, their results might have ground halt a little bit, but their performances are definitely better. They're definitely a more dangerous team with Konate in the team, and they look like getting results much more than they did in sort of January, February time, when they were really struggling, and they were really struggling to create chances and pose any attacking threat. So it is worrying for them, because I don't think they deserve to get relegated. I think they're better than all those three teams in the bottom three. I think they've probably been better than a couple of teams above them overall this season. If you think like sort of Nantes, who've hit some form as well, that recently Toulouse have been terrible and carried by Gradle. You know, that Amiens are good enough to be in this league. So it feels like that it's rather unfortunate from their point of view that they've been sucked back into it. But they really have been sucked back into it, and it's become a relegation battle again. And Dijon and Caen, now they've hit a little bit of, Dijon in particular, have hit a little bit of form, and they've started to pick up some results. They'll fancy themselves of staying up automatically. So Amiens are in trouble, and you're absolutely right. It makes this game, and I think it's 2 more wins. If they've got 32 points, 2 more wins, 38, they should be fine. But that's still 2 more wins from 5 games, which for a club like Amiens in this league isn't a given by any means. So it's going to be tough over the last 5 weeks, and they'll be looking over their shoulders for sure.
That's the funny thing, because you look back at their results and it's not like they've completely dipped out of form, really. I mean, the last 5 games they've drawn 4 of them and lost 1, which isn't ideal, but they've not really fallen off a cliff at any point. The draw against Angers was 0-0, and a 0-0 against Bordeaux would have been disappointing. They were a tad unfortunate in Saint-Etienne a couple of weeks ago as well, and the draw against Dijon has sort of an asterisk next to it with the abuse from the fans at Dijon as well, that they certainly marred that game at least, and they were sort of steamrolled a little bit. I thought they were a little bit lucky for it to be 3-2 against Nantes at the weekend, and Nantes have really been good in the last couple of weeks. But I think it more states, much like we've talked about last year, maybe with Angers, the importance of 3 points over 1, because if in that period of 5 games they've obviously gained 4 points, where Dijon have won 2 and gained 2 points on them straight away, and that's how much of a difference it can be. And they've obviously taken a point from them in the draw as well. So the difference between simply grabbing a goal in a couple of the games and not grabbing that goal has been massive for them. And now, admittedly, some of these games coming up a little bit, give them some options at least anyway. If they don't get a point at Strasbourg, they've got Toulouse at home in the next couple of weeks. They've got Guingamp on the final day of the season at home. They've got Monaco, who are still fighting in the mire with them, and they're maybe a little bit lucky they've got the weekend off and play a potentially tired Rennes team on Wednesday to try and make sure that they're plenty of distance away should Dijon win at the weekend. But no, they've slowly slipped into a bit of a strange one. Whereas Strasbourg, it must be fun being a Strasbourg fan at the moment, because after that cup final, which was terrific for them, got some silverware, they're playing some right entertaining games. There's not been a single game they've been involved in that's not had at least 4 goals in the last 4 games since that cup final that was 0-0, which is almost bears belief, really. The 4-0 one against Reims, the 2-2 draw against PSG, a 3-3 draw against Guingamp, and the 3-1 loss at the weekend to Montpellier, which will disappoint them, because they have been in pretty decent form now. The shackles are sort of off them, it seems, at least anyway, and that's kind of the way they're playing at the moment. It's a bit free-flowing, it's a bit expressive, it's maybe not defensively sound in any kind of way, really, but it's certainly producing entertaining football.
Yeah, it is. I kind of think this is almost expected of Strasbourg, because of the way their season has gone. You know, they were playing this kind of football before they qualified for the Europa at that the Coupe de Ligue final. Sorry, before that happened, they were second top scorers in the league behind PSG. I think they might be again now, joint with Lyon. I think Lyon have got 55, they've got 55, and Lille have got 54. So it really shows that they're capable of scoring goals, they're capable of creating chances. And, you know, that 5-1 win at Monaco, for example, they've had some high-scoring draws this season. And they were playing free-flowing football at that point, and we kind of thought, you know, this is Strasbourg making a push for the top 6 or top 5, as it may be, with European places. But obviously, as we discussed previously and a number of times on the pod in previous editions, having made the Coupe de Ligue final, they rightly switched their focus to that. And whether it was intentional or not, that was the case. And if that hadn't happened, perhaps if they'd lost that semi-final, then we'd see them up above Montpellier and challenging maybe Marseille, maybe even Saint-Etienne in the top six, because they're capable of beating any team in this league, as they've proven over the last 2 years, and that includes PSG. They're something of a bogey team for PSG. Got a draw at home, I seem to remember, in a midweek game this season, and beat them, of course, last year. So they're capable of causing anybody issues. And had it not been for that Coupe de Ligue distraction, they could have been, 10 points better off. They're on 44. Marseille are on 54. The way Marseille have been playing over the last sort of 10, 15 games, I wouldn't put it past Strasbourg, if they were to be able to, if they had fully focused on Ligue, to be 8 points better off, 10 points maybe, given some of the games they lost. They didn't win in 8 games in a row after qualifying for that Coupe de Ligue final. Sorry. So they're capable of these kind of performances, and they're capable of putting teams away. And now they're back to focusing on the league. They're showing that again. And although yes, you're right, they absolutely do concede quite a few goals. And you look at the against column, and Caen have only in second bottom of the league, have only conceded 4 more goals than them. And Amiens as well down there have only conceded 5 more goals than them. But they score goals, and with Jork in good form and a lot of creativity, they're a difficult proposition. And I think Amiens, although they're pretty decent at home, Amiens better anyway, will struggle here, because Strasbourg are the type of team that will be able to pick them off and will use the ball better than them, perhaps, and maybe just more clinical. So tough game for Amiens, but Strasbourg are playing without any inhibitions, I should say, and that it should be an exciting one.
Yeah, that should be sort of the worry for Amiens, because like we say, they are able to score goals, even though they've only scored 28 this season. I think that's more of a reflection of players being out, but they have conceded 48, which is more than Caen. It's more than most teams in Ligue 1, other than Monaco, Dijon and Guingamp. So that's got to be a real worry for them, because Strasbourg have got goals everywhere at the moment, really. Like you say, Jork's been great form. He's sort of filled in the boots of Lebo Matiba, who sort of called off in the second half of the season, and at the same time they've got goals through. They've got 2 from Gonçalves in these last 4 games, 2 from Nuno da Costa in these last 4 games. They've kind of got someone getting involved everywhere across the pitch. Thomason's available for a goal, really. He's got a fair amount this season. I mean, like we've already mentioned, Matiba is capable of getting the goals. I mean, you look across the list, da Costa's got 8, Jork's got 8, Matiba's got 9, Thomason's got 5, Gonçalves has got 5, Sissoko's got 3. They've just got players that are willing to score goals. Jonas Martin's got 3. I know he sometimes takes the penalties as well. Kenny Lala's got his 4 goals, including his 9 assists, which is incredible for a right back. They're just willing to go at teams, and the thing is especially sort of disregarding this game, at least anyway, for a moment for them, but they've got sort of the bare bones, like we've mentioned before, of a real team here. If they can find some defensive solidity, if they can get a little bit more help for Matt Sells, who has had a decent season at least anyway, and Binguru Kamara has been good as well in the cup games when they went on the run as well. So they've got 2 decent goalkeepers. If they can find a little bit more solidity, say a centre back or so, because Lamine Kone is a good centre back. If you can find another one to pair him with that's a bit more consistent, if you can find a nice solid defensive midfielder as well to sit in front of that back 4 and provide some more protection in front of players that they've got in those areas, like Thomas and Gonçalves, Percic, Martin, who are maybe a bit more offensive minded, they could be a really good side next season, and not just sort of sitting in mid-table or competing for cups. Well, they could be competing for cups again, and even a Europa League place. Predictions on this one, then. I'll start off on this game, Adam, and I think this is going to be close. I think it'll be 2-1 Strasbourg. I think they're in a nice vein of form at the moment, and with Amiens maybe a bit more nervy, like you say, without Gorosh for a little while, they might be another game that puts them on the knife edge a little bit. What do you think the score will be?
But I think it'd been interesting. I'm going to say 2 each, though.
It was tempting, the draw, I think, but I'm going for 1 winner at least, because the real interesting game this weekend in Ligue 1, at least anyway, is also on Sunday, and that's Caen, as they host Dijon in their first of their double header against the 2 teams above them, 1 above and 1 below them at least. And Caen, we mentioned on the pod on Monday that they are the cockroach of Ligue 1, because they just won't die. And we mentioned before, Adam, how they just pick up those wins just when they need them the most. And much like their victory against Monaco away from home, the victory at Nice had the sort of same similar DNA of nicking the win when they possibly didn't really deserve it, and Nice had plenty of chances as well. And much like Ches mentioned on Monday, if they do end up staying up, they've got a good chunk of thanks to give to Brice Samba after his couple of games to win those 3 points. But they've got to where they need to be. They're in touching distance, only 2 points behind Dijon ahead of this massive double header for them, and it's got to give them a little bit of confidence, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really does, and they you're right. They as was said previously, they are kind of difficult to get rid of, and I think that win against Nice, as you said, is huge. It is absolutely massive, and it was a bit of a shock as well because Nice are pretty decent at home. They don't concede many goals. Con perhaps don't score too many, and Nice was kind of been plodding away this season, and that just looked like maybe a 1-0 to Nice, a 1-0 Nice win. Not probably a lot of people would have not been surprised by a narrow Nice win. But the fact that Con have done this again, they went to Monaco, a team that they were expected to be beaten by, given the resurgence under Jardim, and went there and won 1-0. The fact that they're capable of this type of performance and doing it without Fayar as well, who's been fantastic for them this season, who was suspended last week, is a real plus. And although they might be a team down the bottom of the table, that I think that those three teams are perhaps given a little bit of a hard time, and there's still some ability in those three sides, and I would back any of them based on the state of Ligue 2 to win the relegation playoff final, which I still imagine one of them will end up in. And you look at players like Fayar, and Djiku's a very good defender. If they got relegated, I imagine that he'd be straight back into Ligue 1. Frederick Gilbert is a player we talked about a lot. On his way to Aston Villa, I seem to remember. It's just that they struggled to score goals, and the fact that Samba made that penalty save from Pierre Malou's penalty, I think, will give the team a lot of confidence, because if they can keep teams out, then that's kind of job one for them, because they're not going to score many goals, and the fact that they've won these two away games 1-0 really underlines that. So the fact that it wasn't a fluke, they've gone to another team that they were expected to be beaten by and get a narrow 1-0 win. They'll fancy themselves between now and the end of the season to sneak into that playoff place, because apart from anything else, those players I've mentioned, it shows that there's some character still left in this team, and that they're still fighting, and they're still capable of causing an upset and fighting their way to safety. So yeah, absolutely massive result against Nice last week, and it'll give them a lot of confidence going forward.
Yeah, you can't underestimate how big that game was for them, really, especially combined with Dijon's result more than anything, because if they don't win that game, they're not 2 points behind, they're 5 points behind, with Dijon having a great chance to put them 8 points behind and pretty much relegate them regardless of the kind of results they could get, really, because this double header is going to be enormous for them. It's going to matter whether they stay up or not, but they wouldn't have even been in that position if they didn't get the victory against Nice. It was absolutely can't really understate that. And like I say, they've got the game against Guingamp. You look at the fixture list, maybe the Bordeaux one is another one where they can maybe get points. I can't see them getting anything against Reims or Lyon if Lyon haven't confirmed their sort of Champions League place by then, at least anyway. You can't imagine Lyon slipping again, but at the same time, you can't do like facing these big teams away from home, it seems like, at the moment. But they are going to stick around. They're going to be a tough proposition. And the strange thing, really, thinking about it, Adam, is for Dijon, is they're probably going to have to break them down, which will seem very unusual for them. It's usually them having to do the defending, and they've been excellent at counter-attacking this past couple of weeks with 7 points from 9, and especially against that game at the weekend against Rennes, where they obviously won the game with a counter-attack at the end and some ice-cold finishing from Wesley Said as well to get the 3 points. But they look like a completely different team over these last 3 weeks after mumbling around, even especially through 2019, where it looked like they were probably the favourites out of the three to go down because of their form. But Kambori's found a way to turn it around.
Yeah, he really has. Sort of belatedly. This is the kind of Dijon I expected. Maybe not with this level of performance and the results they've been getting, beating Lyon, beating Rennes. But this is the Dijon I expected when Kambari took over. And it's happened, but very sort of belatedly. He's a very well respected coach, very experienced coach, and has had some great success at various clubs. Managed PSG, had some great success at Gangon before they sold all their best players over the summer and really dropped off this season. And I when they signed him, I thought this is Dijon safe. I felt like they had enough to stay up under Kambari, and it's taken excuse me, it's taken far too long for them to click under him and to find some sort of cohesion and to continue to pick up points as they did last season under D'Alio when they were really exciting to watch and were fantastic at home. So I think that they'll definitely fancy themselves here, and they'll probably be the onus will probably be on them the way that Caen play to go out and try and win this game, because as you mentioned there, a defeat for Caen here is disastrous. You go into the last 4 weeks, 5 points from safety or 5 points from the relegation playoff, having lost to your nearest rival. Gangon possibly could even overhaul them. A defeat would be disastrous. So there's no way that, even though they're at home, given that they don't score too many goals, just mentioned they're going to come out and attack. So the onus, as you mentioned, here will be on Dijon to break them down. And I think that the players they've got, although perhaps not of late, they haven't shown that of late. They showed it a lot last season, that they are capable of doing that. And that'll be a position that I would imagine that they'll sort of play into. They'll probably expect a low block-ish from Caen and a counter-attack from them. So I imagine that they'll be ready for that, and they'll fancy themselves to break them down. Players like Niam Sliti and Kwon hasn't been starting recently, but he's a dangerous player off the bench. Samaritano is another dangerous player off the bench. I like Wesley Said. He's got some creativity and capable of breaking teams down, and they'll go there as favourites for me, despite Caen's miraculous away wins. But Caen have got those wins by sitting deep, and they'll in two big games as well. And I imagine they'll do it again here. But I think you're right. This is much later than we thought, and they finally found that form that we were expecting for them a little while ago, perhaps.
Yeah, and you mentioned it perfectly there, Adam, that you're really frustrated by some of these really good players last season, and players we expected to sort of kick on and even maybe get moves in this summer, because they were really excellent last season. Naim City was superb, but had a pretty poor and quiet World Cup, and has come back and been maybe half the player he was last season. You can sort of mitigate Kwon Chang-hoon's sort of dip to a new manager not playing him as much as well, like say a lot of appearances off the bench, and also that serious injury he suffered right at the end of last season that curtailed it, because he was excellent last season, a real spark plug for them. And Tavares as well, as it's just not been the finisher he was last season. Really, it's the fact that they're missing these sort of spark plugs, because we mentioned last season how much they were great at sort of being a buzzing team. They were active, and when they were on the counter attack, they were just frightening, because they were always just so active. They'd be at your heels. They would be running at you at pace and trickery and willingness to attack you. And that's just sort of seemed to have left them. The confidence of that season is they're bereft of it at the moment, and they'll be thankful Wesley Side hit a bit of form, that, like you say, that they've got some experienced players around them. Florent Beaumont's been playing a little bit more recently as well to give them that bit of leadership they maybe need. Jano got the goal at the weekend as well. It's good to see him scoring a nice finish again. It's been a while since he scored a pretty goal like he did similar. I think it was the PSG game last season, wasn't it? I think he scored the really wonderful goal. But it's just a bit frustrating that they've got out of those three. For me, they've got players that have got the ability. I mean, even at the back, we've barely mentioned Valentin Rozier's name this season, and he was linked with the bigger clubs in Ligue 1, especially like Lyon and Marseille, and it doesn't look like he's going to be anywhere near those sort of positions. Same with Shafiq, and it just it's disappointing. I know they've lost Rene, obviously, but he's not had the greatest season at Toulouse really more than anything. But it just feels like there's going to be one game where they all click in it. To me, with that game, knowing how important that game is to Caen, and the fact that it will pretty knock them out of contention if they do, and with winnable games really to come, Nantes, Strasbourg, PSG, who've already won the league, and Toulouse to finish the season, there's certainly winnable games further down the line. There's certainly some more chances at 3 points, and if they can beat Caen, they know that they've got 4 games and they can pick up 3 points somewhere within there and make themselves, if not relegation playoff, even potentially safe. So it's enormous for them. But so I can't think of a bigger game this weekend across Europe, really, to be fair, Adam, between two sides in particular at this stage of a season. What's your prediction on the score on this one?
I think Dijon go there and get a win, 1-0. It's actually a bad game for Gangon, because at this sort of this type of at this end of the season, at this end of the league, you kind of expect your rivals to lose, but they know that they'll either both get points or one of them will get 3 points, which is actually a pretty bad situation to be in, given that they're behind them both. So it could be a potentially bad one for Dijon, but for Gangon, sorry. But Dijon 1-0 win for me.
Yeah, I'm going for a 2-1 win. I think it just feels like Dijon have got the result, and I do feel sorry for Gang. They absolutely have to get something at Nice, don't they? And Nice are at least a team that's going to give you opportunities, but they need to put the other game out of their mind, get 3 points, and hope that they're still within touching distance of someone when they face Cologne next weekend, because they are in a world of trouble at the moment. On to our final game this weekend, and going backwards, sort of really back to Friday, because at the top end of the table, Lyon will be going away to Bordeaux, because Lyon haven't quite secured their Champions League service, and Saint-Etienne biting at their heels, and some absolutely enormous games coming up for them soon. They've got Lille next weekend and Marseille the weekend after, in an absolutely gigantic doubleheader for them, which could go either way depending on the result here, really, because they got a good win against Angers. They were 2-0 up for a long period of time and didn't let it slip this time. And Bordeaux have been a bit indifferent recently, but especially if they get a victory here, it means that game against Lille, depending on their result, is not looking at trying to stave off losing that game and allowing someone else to catch them, but more in essence of there's maybe a slimmer of a chance, at least anyway, of them even catching Lille and getting that automatic Champions League place.
Yeah, it's still possible. I think that given Lille's result last week, although Lille were very unfortunate, what I thought was a ludicrous VAR decision that prevented them probably winning the game. There was where it was a handball was involved, and they scored, and it was eventually disallowed. Very harsh, I thought. Although they even though they beat PSG very handsomely, they're capable of dropping points. And last week's result for Lyon against Angers will buoy them quite significantly, given that I was ready to say that Saint-Etienne were favourites for the third place, because the way that they've kind of capitulated and with the situation with Genesio, that he was supposed to be being offered a contract, then they lost that semi-final to Rennes, and that was withdrawn, and then they were going to decide it in the season, and now Genesio is saying that he's definitely going to leave, and fans have been protesting against him for a long time, and it's kind of just a toxic feeling around the club. I just felt that although they have a significant at this stage of the season points advantage, that given that terrible defeat to Dijon and the way they played the following week, that there was a definite slide happening at Lyon, and that they could easily be overhauled by a Saint-Etienne team in form. But it's funny how 1 weekend changes everything. Although Saint-Etienne is still only 3 points back, and we're still gathering momentum. Brilliant win at Rennes last week. Those 3 points were massive for Lyon, even though they were perhaps against the side they would expect to beat, who are in mid-table and haven't got much to play for. And going to Parc OL, they would expect to beat pretty much anyone. The steadying of the ship can't be underestimated, if you like. So even though they've got Saint-Etienne sort of biting at their heels, perhaps that win, Genesio recovers some confidence. The squad sort of think, this is the last few games under the current manager. We're playing for Champions League football. We're playing for contracts. We're playing for moves. We're playing to impress the next manager. There are things that both on a collective and an individual basis that we need to work towards. Who knows? Lille drop off. Then Lyon could possibly be there to pick up the pieces and snatch the second place. And although we talk about top three as Champions League places, given that the top 4 leagues get 4 automatic group stage places, the second place in Ligue 1 is massive, because you don't have to qualify. Although that's not as qualifying isn't as hard as it used to be, there's still a huge difference in terms of pre-season. You don't have to come back as early. You can focus on the league, going straight into group stages. You haven't got this intense 2-legged game, maybe 2 sets of two-legged games. I can't remember which group round that France's third place team goes into this year, but you've got that distraction at the start of the season that can offset your season. If you lose, you've suddenly lost the biggest thing that you've been working for towards the whole season previously. So that difference between second and third is actually pretty massive. And Lyon will be desperate to overhaul Lille if they can. And like I said, after that narrow win over Angers, perhaps confidence will return and perhaps they'll fancy themselves to overhaul Lille. 6 points with 5 games left is going to be tough given the way that Lille have played over the course of the year. But who knows? If they win all those games, Lille could easily drop those points given how competitive the league is behind PSG. So they'll be hopeful again, and that win made all the difference.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain how it works now. Lyon are in the third qualifying stage, which is the one before the group,
and
straight before the group stage.
Is it not a playoff round as well? Or is that just because there's two routes? There's like a league route and then like a league winners route and then everybody else route, if you like. I'm not sure which one has the playoff round, but it is. So yeah, it's all over there.
Yeah, I think they fall in the round just before the group stages. I think
nice.
Whatever they name it now, it's strange, but it's all sort of over the place. I remember reading earlier that PAOK, who've just won the Greek league, have to sort of sit in that same qualifying group, which is seems a little bit strange to me. But nonetheless, it's a strange scenario really for Lyon, because, like you say, that second place is absolutely enormous, and it's probably bigger. Well, it's big for both teams, but I think, thinking of it, really, Lyon would prefer to probably even finish out in fourth rather than third if they had to, and finish second if they can, because we don't know what this team's going to look like next season. There's rumours that 3, 4, 5, 6 players could be going at this team when Genesio leaves. They'll see that as the perfect time for them to go. I'm imagining Fekir probably moves on to pastures new. Depay will be looking for yet another money rolling move, and I'm sure many Lyon fans won't be too disappointed to see the back of him. There's rumours that Ndombele's agents have been meeting Real Madrid today, so it looks like he's pretty much guaranteed a move as well. And then you look at maybe some of the deadwood, you're thinking maybe one of the right backs in like a Raphael or a Kenny Tete probably moving on. You think some of the experienced players like Morel may move on as well. You'd expect Cornet to probably get a move somewhere. It's maybe not as glamorous as he once wished, but he's not getting the game time to really improve it at the age he's at. And you're thinking that when you add those all together, really, it could be a completely different team next season. I mean, they're supposedly looking at Ben Godfrey at Norwich as well, who's an excellent young defender, although whether he'll be tempted away when he's got a chance at Premier League riches as well is maybe a little bit difficult to fathom unless Champions League football can tempt him. But it could be a completely different team next season. You could imagine a scenario where the front line changes from Fekir, Depay and Traore to just Dembele, Terrier, and even maybe Aouar pushed forward in that scenario where all three of those go. So, in all honesty, them finishing third and having to bed a new team into a game that you absolutely need to win to get into the group stages will kind of be a half nightmare scenario for them. If they get someone that's experienced, that's maybe even won their league, it's going to be a really difficult game for them to try and traverse. And I'm not saying it wouldn't be for Lille either, but it's going to be a really interesting time in the summer, when depending on where they finish, because I don't know if they maybe would far rather fancy an automatic go into the Europa League and maybe a competition they can win with a young, interesting side and get that summer off. But I'm sure they'll rather take Champions League football regardless. But on to Bordeaux quickly, Adam. We thought they'd sort of turned the corner when they beat Marseille. That Paulo Sousa's message was starting to get through, and this club would show us something different in the last couple of games of the season, and some of these players would hit a new apex. But that's not really been the case. They were thumped by Saint-Etienne, and in all honesty, Nîmes were the much better side in their 2-1 victory at the weekend. And it's just more of a damning indictment, not of Sousa, who's obviously not been long enough to do it, but of this squad, because we expected some kind of reaction with a new manager appointment, but there's been zero new manager bounce, and this team needs a overhaul.
It really does, and it's really disappointing. You're absolutely right. There hasn't been any new manager bounce at all. It's really just more of the same. And although I kind of felt like Ricardo Gomez and Eric Bedway's kind of partnership was a little bit temporary anyway. After Poyet left, Although I think that Gomez's contract extended beyond the season, I didn't see it lasting that long. You would have felt that the introduction of Sosa would be a sizable step up in managerial quality, in experience, in know-how, and in being able to get the best out of this squad, and that hasn't proven the case. And I think that the club as a whole is in a real malaise at the moment. Attendances are down, fans are really not sort of, there isn't unrest there is unrest, but there isn't the unrest in the classic sense like we've seen at Lyon and Toulouse maybe recently, at other clubs. It just seemed really depressed. It just seems like a really down kind of atmosphere that they've had since Willy Sagnol's reign. I would imagine that they've had almost exactly the same scenario where they've threatened to do well. They've somehow fought their way back into Europe. They've had sort of 3 or 4 months of playing okay, and then it's all fallen apart again, and that manager's been sacked, and that keeps happening. And the way that Sosa started it almost feels like more of the same. So I kind of wouldn't blame them, given they're a big club. They won the league 10 years ago, and they've won a number of trophies, and they're a historic team, and they've become to expect much better than the way the team have been playing in the last 4 or 5 years. So I think for Sosa, you're absolutely right. The squad needs an overhaul, absolutely, and we'll see that in the summer with the new American investors involved. They supposedly committed quite a lot to transfers over the next three seasons, and they're going to focus on younger players, which will, at least from fans' point of view, will hopefully bring some exciting raw talent into the club and bolster the quality of the team, which is lacking at the moment. And we've seen Josh Madger came in, who's unfortunately, after his first goal, with his first shot, I think, in Ligue last week away at Nîmes, his season's over after a bit of a knee injury, but he's the type of player that they can expect more of, I would imagine, over the summer. And it's just where they prioritise, because Sosa looks intent on playing 3-4-3 or playing 3 centre backs with any sort of variation on setup from there. And it's kind of dependent on who they lose over the course of the summer. Jules Koundé's been absolutely brilliant this season. Only 20, he could go at centre back. He'd be very difficult to replace. You imagine Francois Camano will go somewhere very close to Monaco in the winter. Didn't leave, but you imagine he'll go. Jan Karamo's loan deal is up. Samuel Callow, I imagine, will be around, but he's a player that they will put quite a high fee on, and if they get a decent bid, will go as well. So it's kind of trying to balance those levers with exciting young talent and trying to fill the gaps in the squad that already exists and not create too many by selling those players. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the state of the squad is come September the 1st after the summer, because with Sosa's impact, with the new owners, there could be a lot of change, and it could go really well. The French clubs have proven of late that they're capable of scouting fantastic players, and like Nice, for example, on a low budget. But it's capable of going completely wrong. And so Monaco have proven the opposite, that you can go too far one way and focus on youth team players and then lacking the experience to bring them along, and it can be the club that the squad doesn't gel and there's no cohesion, like we saw under Thierry Henry, with young players being thrown in and lacking experience and having no sort of understanding. So they've got to be really careful to not become like Monaco were and try and emulate Nice, and that's not an easy feat. They did fantastically well to compete at the top of the league as they did under Lucien Favre. So Bordeaux have a long way to go, and I think if you look at the 20 league clubs, or assuming that, well, the ones that stay up anyway, obviously the ones that get relegated would be slightly different, but the ones that stay up, they're the club that are most in flux, and we don't really know what to expect from them going forward, and they'll probably then be the most interesting to watch over the summer as a result. So interesting times ahead, and from a fan's point of view, if I was a Bordeaux fan, I just want to see exciting football. I'd want to get the crowds back in. I'd want to see them fill the with Atlantic, which they rarely do, and pretty much only do when PSG and maybe Marseille come to visit. So because it's a great stadium, and it was great at the Euros when it was full for knockout games and the like. So I think that's kind of, I think I may have mentioned this before on the pod, but that's really the crux of the issue for them, is to get the club back in a positive frame of mind and push on next season.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Adam, when you mentioned that sway too far one way, because I think the most important thing you can tell from Bordeaux, especially in 2019, is they lack leaders. They lack any sort of sense of responsibility for their players, because there's players like Yann Caramo, who's had his own troubles off the field really with the club in recent times, who's Fairview attitude. And you think even back to last season, the craziness with Malcolm and the like, and the sort of little parties and bits like that. That ill discipline seeped in, and you can see it even in the game they won against Marseille. The experienced defender Pablo got himself sent off for something absolutely asinine, really, and unforgivable for someone of his experience. And that just smells of me that they need a real leader joining the club. They need to have a look at, yes, players they can invest in and take for the future, but character is more important as well. As they need someone who can help nurture these young players and teach them the right ways to act and behave, both on and off the field, because it seeped into the club this season. And admittedly, if they didn't have that little bit of sprinkle of quality that they've got, they will be in real trouble, especially after. I mean, if they didn't have that excellent sort of decent start to the season after they'd gone out of Europe, they would have been in real trouble. Because if you look back, they had 2 wins in January. They had the 1 win in February. They had the 1 win in April. That's 4 wins in 2019, and that's in most cases relegation form, and that's not anywhere near good enough. They need experience. They need to be whipped into shape, and I'm sure Paulo Sousa will be ready to be wielding that axe in the summer. What do you think the score will be in this one, Adam?
This is an interesting one, but I still think maybe this is a game that suits Lyon. I'm going to say 3-1 Lyon.
I think Bordeaux get a hiding in this one. I think this is going to be a 5-0 for Lyon and give them some real confidence boost for that game against Lille. I honestly, looking at Bordeaux's games coming up, because they've got Angers, Lille, Reims, and Caen to finish the season. I think that only that last game they might pick up some points. Really, I think they're really showing a lack of fight really for this end of the season, and Sousa's got a lot of bad apples to take out of that team. That's all from us this week. My thanks to Adam and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the main show, which will be back on Monday, looking at who won the Coupe de France final. But for now, enjoy your weekend of football.